You know, I don't spend much time fixated on many things, especially video games. But there's one topic that's always lingered in the back of my mind, clawing at me like an itch I could never quite scratch. Distrust. The beta Danganronpa. The version we were robbed. Before Distrust ever entered development, Spike was in a kind of creative stuck, a 2-year stretch from October 2007 to October 2009 where almost everything they released was either a sequel or an adaptation of already existing game series. Danganronpa wasn't even an idea at this point. But that changed when Kazutaka Kodaka approached producer Yoshinori Terasawa with a simple pitch. Quote, 15 teenagers killing time or our 7 days survival war. At its early stage, Kodaka and Terasawa sent multiple emails back and forth about the idea of a psychopop high school detective mystery. Thus, the main concept of Danganronpa was formed. Distrust was set to be purely a visual novel, not containing any of the action elements like Trigger Happy Havoc has. Kodaka continued to develop the game. Though it had the same concept, students going through trials and 2.5D motion graphics, there is one key difference. Distrust featured red blood and rather gruesome executions. Unlike the Danganronpa signature pink blood we've come to love, Distrust would feature red blood. If you don't know, Danganronpa has pink blood to avoid their games being too disturbing. In Japan, depictions of realistic blood can lead to higher age ratings. The game was originally meant for the Sony PSP, since it was cheaper to develop for and the system was known for being open to wider, more unique games. But there was a problem. PSP games weren't selling that well, and the genre was already super niche. The beta character designs feel really unique to me. There's something beautiful about them, more human-like, if that makes sense. Though, it might just be the art style they used. Either way, it definitely gives off that edgier vibe they were going for. However, in this photo, they seem to have more color. I think that just adds to the edginess, especially with the way they're posed. Some of the characters were given different names before having their final ones. Leon Kuwata was Kazuo Matsuzaki. Hifumi Yamada was Yuji Ando. Kyoko Kirigiri was Giro Kirigiri. Mikoto Niji was Shujinko, which means protagonist in Japanese. Celestia Ludenberg was S. Rodenberg, as well as Yasuhiro Isegai. Kiyotaka Ishimaru was Kiyotaka Ishiro. Mondo Owada was Kazuo Kurosaki. However, Monokuma's beta design is often talked about the most, as it has him as a human rather than a bear, with visible internal organs. His design was made to resemble an anatomy doll. His design still featured that split-in-half, black and white design. However, according to Terasawa, Monokuma was always intended to be a robot. Very interesting. There's very little footage of the game that has been released out to the public, but there are some noticeable changes that we could spot. During class trials, there was a feature called the Trust-Distrust meter. It measured how much the other students trusted or suspected you, with 5 distinct levels. It's likely this system was an early version of what became the influence gauge in the final game. It really shows how much darker and more psychological Distrust was aiming to be. This photo seems to be called Tough Decisions. This would come up from time to time, leading to branching paths and even alternate endings. The choices you made directly affected the Trust-Distrust meter, and if you managed to max out a character's trust, they'd actually become your ally during investigations. But it didn't stop there. The level of trust you had with others could also determine which murders happened. The weak points appear in the dialogue boxes rather than the floating text seen in Trigger Happy Havoc. Executions were in the style of a manga strip rather than the fully animated executions we've been given. This particular photo has an early version of Junko being decapitated by a guillotine. Just brutal. A rhythm-based trial minigame was also included, where you had to fire bullets containing pieces of trial information at the right time. It's pretty similar to the minigames we see in the final class trials. One of the only videos that features in-game footage is the execution of Leon Kuwata after he murdered Kyoko Kirigiri. This execution is very similar to the final version of Leon's execution, although this version features a scrolling selection instead of the slot machine when the culprit is revealed. notable red blood instead of pink, and Leon's visible corpse at the end of the execution. The beta design is just so fascinating to me. It feels way more raw and brutal. You can actually see the pain on Leon's face. And the lack of color just makes it even more disturbing. I can't help but feel that if we got this version of Danganronpa instead of Trigger Happy Havoc, it might have been even more respected. Maybe even more loved. However, I don't want to get off this topic just yet. There are a few more videos I want to show. This video is a test trial using early sprite designs for Trigger Happy Havoc. It's not distressed content, but it's still really interesting, especially seeing Sayaka in the trial. It also shows that the climax comic concept was already in place, even this early on. This video shows some of the only official, high-quality images from Distrust. There's something about them that feels off in a really compelling way. The art style, the red blood, the characters themselves. It's in a way that makes me heartbroken of what we could have gotten. There are also fan-made trials people have reconstructed, but because these are fan-made I won't be showing them. If you are interested, I suggest checking them out for yourself. For the classrooms, specifically Classroom 5C, looks almost identical to images of a classroom shown in the Danganronpa Distrust presentation. However, the scrapped background images are actually based off real-life locations. We will now move on to the cutting room floor's content on Distrust. It will mainly go over photos we've seen with some background information. This photo shows the earliest designs for the protagonist and the other students. But there's something strange in the white square. A lot of people assume it's the face of the mastermind, big black eyes, and a finger held over the mouth, like it's telling the viewer to stay quiet. It's so unsettling yet so intriguing. I had my cousin edit the photo so we can see the face better, and just look for yourself. Here is the translation for the photo. Characters: 15 high school students. 15 students participating in the killing game. At first they seem like strangers to each other. And every time this story continues, it becomes clearer. Product: second year in high school, male. Can adapt fast and hates standing out. Suddenly loses consciousness while on his way home. When he comes to his senses, he's in this setting in the killing school. Right side, examiner speaks to the students through the speakers of the school. He seems like the person who's hosting this killing game. What is his goal? This gruesome photo features what seems to be early designs of Toko, Kyoko, Leon, and Yasuhiro investigating around a rusted basement, which has a box filled with blood spilling out onto the floor. There is some blood also splattered against a pillar. The image to the right has a bloody severed head of a girl that is looking at the viewer. Blood is spewing from her mouth, placed on box that has the number 15. There's also seems to be a bloody severed hand that's still gripping what the website assumes to be a portable mirror. The website has no information on this image other than a translation for it. But from the translation, I'm assuming this image would tell the player how to play the game or explaining how the concept works. Gameplay flow: introduction, first part to second part to third part to multiple endings, changing depending on who survived and who killed. Flow: first part, Blackened gets chosen, people get suspicious of each other, who's getting murdered. That kind of thrill, a murder happens, look for the Blackened. Investigation, you don't know who's your ally, so you'll have to figure it probing everyone. You might end up giving the killer information. And make allies who you can trust. Trials, Everyone has to participate in this vote. Not only will you have to solve this mystery, but you'll have to listen to everyone's opinion while controlling the number of votes. Trials results. The whole idea of multiple endings was completely scrapped in the final game, which went for a much more linear experience. It also looks like Distrust was only split into 3 or maybe 4 chapters. And the idea of making allies or accidentally giving the killer information as a kind of punishment mechanic was also cut. I want to interrupt for a moment, because honestly, reading and learning about what Distrust could have been is putting me in such a sad mood. These ideas, multiple endings, forming alliances, accidentally giving the killer information, they're so creative. All of it would have made Danganronpa even more unique, weird, and kind of lovable in its own twisted way. Especially in today's world, where people are craving something different, this could have really stood out. Danganronpa today may be very loved, but it's honestly quite flawed and gets boring as the series goes on. So I hope one day Spike will feel confident enough to develop Distrust and release it as a real game. It wouldn't even matter to me if it would be canon or not in the Danganronpa universe. Back to our topic, there is a translation for this photo. Investigation part, chasing the blackened. Collect keywords. Investigate places that stand out. Explore the mysterious school. This is a gold dart. Collect keywords that can become clues in preparation for the trial. You can check the others' whereabouts on with the icon on the map. However, it seems when the game was in its second phase of development, the killing game was referred to as an experiment. The closed-off school. 15 high school students wake up in a large, strange facility. But the windows and entrances and exits are all blocked off. In order to mess with the confused 15 students further, a chime rings out in the facility. And then, an uncanny announcement plays. He declares himself as the instructor. To everyone, 7 days from now, I will be conducting an experiment on you, but I'm not talking about a simple experiment. It's going to be a killing game experiment. We have a translation for a picture featuring the trust-distrust system. Thrilling communication. Words can lead to disaster. Product, I found a clue that perpetrator left behind. Or, I found a clue that perpetrator left behind. If you say another guy thinks, Hifumi, is he onto me? I'll have to kill him as well. Will you say it or keep it to yourself? It can decide between life and death. Exciting debates. Starting Nico Do mode, basically like the comment system on Nico Nico Daga, pick the appropriate statement from all of the incoming statements. In this photo, we see characters freaking out over Kyoko's corpse, who has been stabbed and now lying on the desk. Next, there's a shot of the main cast surrounding the protagonist in what looks like a school warehouse. The time reads 11:02 p.m. Then we have a series of images, an early design of Chihiro saying he didn't do it, and even Robo Justice makes an appearance. The last image is the most interesting. It is assumed this is an early execution, with Monokuma attacking Chihiro using an axe. In this point, Monokuma was made to be a plushie with a speaker inside rather than a robot. I'm assuming this was a promo, and the designs are now much closer to their current ones. Very pretty artwork. Here is a series of images, and the translations are telling the player how to play the game. I will now read them off according to each image they're put with. High-speed reasoning action. When your next gauge fills, the text automatically advances. If you are careless during your argument, you'll get left behind. You will see blue words among the text. These indicate weak points for the player. The player's actions in response to these words will change the discussion and take a new direction. Everything is fully voiced during class trials. Shoot through the weak points with the bullets you picked up during investigation. L equals bullet select. While holding L, you can press the directional keys to pick a bullet. R equals rebuttal trigger. Pick the weak point with the directional buttons and state your argument. Make your judgment during the limited time. Strike at your opponent's vital points with L and R. Destroy arguments with the rebuttal trigger. Because of the blackened's ulterior motives, the trials will always advance to the complete opposite of the truth. With the rebuttal trigger, You can change the direction of the trials by striking out the weak points of their arguments with your own opinion. It was also hinted that the player could also kill and become a Blackened as well. They would even find inspiration from the movie franchise SAW, with quote green, snuff-like image quality during the execution. You cannot experience this kind of fresh experience in other games. 1. World's first high-speed debate action genre. You can only experience the thrill and exhilaration from our high-speed instinctive reasoning game. 2. Unique direction never seen before, 2.5D motion graphics, bewitching you with graphics combining 2D and 3D, a fresh direction never seen before. 3. Execute your ultimate friends with the majority of the votes. Corrupt democracy, strengthen your bonds with your schoolmates and bring order or disorder in a non-stop fashion, raising the stakes and developing the story in a wicked way. And, for whatever reason, Asuka from Neon Genesis Evangelion would be featured in this promo image. This would be the student presentation card, and this seems to be an early photo of Mondo Owada. The translation shows some skills that would be featured. These skills would help you through the trials and with the students. However, many of these skills would not make it into the final game. Expect the raw skill, which makes the comments in the trial become slower. You would collect Monokuma meals spread throughout the game and play gacha at the school store. With these meals, you could get side story for each character, episodes about their past, with graphics, special events, such as pool events, mainly after the second week, high-quality app presents, missables, story elements, a stony mask that turns you into a vampire when worn, a door that leads to nowhere. Extra mode with ad hoc calling behind the gymnasium, exchange collected items and scenarios with ad hoc. Exchange side stories of each character. Exchange special events, exchange present items. Exchange missables, edited. They would even offer DLC, which would include more character side story content along with a Monokuma trap that would either say quote cute things or intentionally cuss at you. The final thing I will mention from the cutting room floor is early footage of Leon's execution at the STEC 2011 conference. This execution was shown to demonstrate the overall theme Distrust would have. This is the one I shown earlier. But the 2017 French conference would show an early version of the test execution. For some reason, this showing has many differences than for the STEC 2011, including, music being heard is nowhere to be found in the final game, as they likely haven't hired Masafumi Takada yet to compose tracks for the game. The music is also very industrial-like, which makes the SAW inspiration extremely more obvious, given that film also uses an industrial-like soundtrack. Different, albeit goofy SFX can be heard for the text scrolling. The text at the beginning uses different colors than being placed on colored boxes. The necklace chain on Leon's body is no longer there. We are now done with the cutting room floor section, and now, we will move on to the Polygon interview. It is titled, The Original Danganronpa, Distrust, was too gruesome even for its creators. Distrust was the original image of the game obviously, and it was psycho shock, Kodaka said. So essentially, for us, that would be something like just straight up gruesome horror. However, when we were thinking about whether or not to do it, we felt that the audience for that was really small. Even in a place like America, the audience would still be small, but because the population's bigger, it might sell more. Kodaka said he's included everything he's ever wanted to say or write within Danganronpa, though other early aspects of the game were toned down or tweaked. An early plan, for example, involved a character being sliced into pieces. In this case, gore wasn't the primary reason for ditching the death. But at the end of the day, things of that nature that are that gruesome and that dark, the audience was too small for us to really want to pursue that to its end. Kodaka said he's included everything he's ever wanted to say or write within Danganronpa, though other early aspects of the game were toned down or tweaked. An early plan, for example, involved a character being sliced into pieces. In this case, gore wasn't the primary reason for ditching the death. It's like the character loses his essence by doing that, Kodaka said. Even though a character might die during the events of the game, provided they remain whole, I feel that they'll remain whole in the person's memory, and that character will still be cute or memorable or liked by the player. But if I were to actually have them be dismembered, the character would lose that sense of their essence and the ability to remain within the player's imagination and memory. The writer added that infusing humor into the experience, and keeping the tone lighter, actually made the project more interesting for him. He takes tonal cues from over-the-top violent movies, think Quentin Tarantino films, he said. At the end of the day, they chose reach over raw brutality. And while Danganronpa kept a lot of its weirdness and edge, it also became something more stylized, more marketable. But it's hard not to wonder, what if they had stuck with that original vision? Would you play Distrust? If they had followed through with that original, darker vision, would Danganronpa have been even more powerful? Or would it have lost something that made it what it is today?